A GB News People's poll finds the majority of Brits would prefer a Labour government with Keir Starmer at the helm rather than a Conservative government under Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak.
But it comes as Labour currently hold a 14-point lead over the Tories. The findings were conducted by People polling and also discovered that the word that comes to mind the most about the frontrunner in the leadership battle, Liz Truss, is untrustworthy.
Which doesn't really look good, does it, at the moment? Well, we're joined now by Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent, Matthew Goodwin. Yes, does it seem to you as well that the wheels has come off the Tory truck?
The wheels are coming off. A 14-point lead for the Labour Party is essentially a Labour majority, were that to be replicated at the next general election. And, you know, reminding ourselves, the Conservatives took a huge gamble by deciding to get rid of Boris Johnson and elect somebody new. What we can see in these numbers is that actually a lot of people now have tuned out. They're not lining up behind the Conservatives. Keir Starmer and Labour are comfortably ahead in the polls. And this really is going to pile pressure on whoever becomes the next leader of the party and whoever becomes the next Prime Minister. There is a risk here, clearly in these numbers, that if things don't change, the Conservatives are looking at a sort of 1997-2001 scenario where they not only lose that all-important red wall in Northern England, but they also lose a large chunk of that blue wall across the south, and that would be a nightmare scenario for the party.
So that, I mean, this is a clear case, is it, of the government losing an election, as it were, rather than the opposition winning one. And is that down, I mean, do you think that is down to all this hoo-ha and this very long, it seems like a very long leadership battle between these two people that is just turning people off?
Well, I think you just saw what's playing out in the clip that you just showed and what Anne was mentioning about the problems your friends and relatives have been having just trying to get an ambulance. I think the problem facing the Conservative Party at the moment is that it simply looks adrift from the problems that are facing the rest of the country. And when a political party or a governing party is seen to be on its own side and not on the side of the people, things start to fall apart very quickly. So, you know, if I were sort of in Team Truss or in Team Sunak or whoever ends up running number 10 from September 5th, the first priority is, I think, they've got to re-establish a relationship with the country as quickly as possible, which is holding their hands up and say, you know, this hasn't been a great summer for the Conservative Party. The government's made a lot of mistakes. But here's a plan for the winter. Here's a plan for how we're actually going to get through the most difficult period in 50 years.
And Liz Truss herself, who is guaranteed, or they say guaranteed to get it, certainly the front runner by the sound of it, she doesn't do very well herself up against, in your poll, up against Keir Starmer, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. So if you ask voters, would you rather have a Labour government under Keir Starmer or a Conservative government under Liz Truss? Keir Starmer currently wins hands down, not even close. If you then say to voters, what do you think about Liz Truss? Just tell me one word. What comes to mind? We're not, you know, putting words in voters' mouths. We're saying, give us a word. And the dominant theme is untrustworthy.
Yeah, that's a little bit unfair, isn't it? Because why would people necessarily say that? I mean, I don't know. Frankly, I don't know enough about her to say whether she's trustworthy or not.
So that is a very valid point, but here's what I think is going on. The Conservative brand has become so tarnished over the last few months that actually it's infecting everybody within that party. And if Liz Truss becomes the next Prime Minister, the immediate priority for her team will be to draw a line between the last administration and her administration, because that legacy, you know, the chaos, the turmoil, the division, is already clearly damaging her brand in the eyes of many voters.
Do you think part of the problem has been, during this leadership election, that both candidates they're addressing the Tory faithful because they're the only people with a vote on this? They're not actually saying the things that rather might be more popular for a general election, appealing to the masses of people.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think if you ask people what are the top issues in the country, they say, I want to talk about the cost of living, I want to talk about ambulances, GPs, public services, but I also want to talk to some extent about things like migration, but they also want to talk about things that the candidates haven't really gone anywhere near. It isn't just the Channel crossings. They want to talk about the level of overall migration in the country, which in the eyes of many people is still too high.